you define natural talent to me? Do you believe that to kind of fully be true then?
I think it's a blend, right? And
Scott!
Driver 61 is a former racer who turned his passion into a movement.
After years of being a professional driver, he is now sharing his secrets to the world of racing.
the biggest thing that anyone can work on is making sure they're looking in the right place. 80% of driving quickly on track is vision.
How do you get a rookie with basic experience within 1.5% of someone in a racing car?
The quickest way to do it is to break everything down. You do the boring stuff, brake in a straight line, get the braking pressure right, keep on doing it 50 times in a row, and that's how you learn. Yeah, I loved it, of course, but it was hugely stressful.
It sounds like from your story, all you've ever known is racing. Life sometimes gives you all these punches and it feels like you're being punched away from the thing that you love.
I wasn't going to be able to send the money for the rent that month, and then COVID hits, and I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do now?
Scott, otherwise known to many as Driver 61, you've built something which has changed the way that people are educated around racing and how they can improve their talent on and off the track, because so much of it is down to so many microns that make differences in the world that you do. Not only that, you've built a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers, which puts you in just a small percentage of creators in the entire world. So you must be very proud of everything that's led you up to the moment of sitting in this van to tell your story to my listeners. But in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
I'm a racing driver at heart. I kind of had my first career as a racing driver, and now I make content to bring more people into the sport that I love and explain the details behind it and the way in which the engineers and the drivers are always pushing the extremities of what's possible.
What I find with so many guests that sit opposite me in this van is the thing that, like, when we're in our earliest years, that we set out, that sparks us, that finds our passion. Many, many, many moons later, life looks so different, but can equally be happy or can equally be fulfilling or brilliant or open doors that you never thought possible. Just how different is your life now to what you'd pictured it to be maybe when you were kind of 15, 16?
I'd say externally it's very different, but internally the way that I work and the way that I push and the way that I look at the details, it's actually very similar. There's a lot of similarities between when I was racing to what I do now, and it's just the same thread that runs through. But the life is very different. Obviously, I always wanted to race. I always wanted to get to Formula One, and now I've got a big YouTube channel. So it is very different, but you know, the fundamentals are pretty much the same, to be honest.
But when you say the fundamentals are basically still the same, we're going to go on to talk a lot about fundamentals today, because everybody thinks they're a racing driver until a real one shows them what racing really looks like, right? So we're going to talk about how people can improve their track days, because so many people like myself and my friends just end up balling around a track thinking that we're the Stig, and when the Stig shows up we find out that we're actually not the Stig. But we're also going to talk about how the hell your life has changed from that point of your earliest years and then entering your 20s and racing all the way through to building over 1 million subscribers on YouTube now. But what would you say that all of those things that you've done, like must have been a point where you were captivated behind cars and racing in your earliest years? Do you remember that? Like, is it significant?
It was so ingrained from the beginning that actually I don't remember where it started. And it's interesting, I've got a 5-year-old now. The same's happening to him. I think it all started so early. I was at track days and racing events from when I was 2 years old. My dad was racing. I had a go-kart at the age of 4. It's always been there. It's always been my love. And so I don't remember a specific point. I do remember snapshots as we go along. But right at the beginning, it's just always been there. So I've been very lucky in that respect.
There's so many people that watch Formula One, that watch Formula 3 or different racing series, whether it's the GT cars, whether it's IndyCar, whatever it is. And they think, damn it, I'd have loved to have done that. Like, I wish that was the thing I chose as my passion or hobby when I was growing up. But we'll get into the accessibility of racing and like how different people start. But do you think to be on a grid somewhere now, it has to start from the age of like 4 to 6 these days? Or is it possible to become a racing driver later in life?
I definitely think it helps if you start earlier, because all of the feeling, the way that you understand how the car behaves beneath you, if that's ingrained from the beginning into your nervous system, you have all of that information there naturally. But it's only because it's becomes, started off so early. You can teach it, but as you get older and older, it does get more difficult. I've worked with drivers that have been very young, all the way up to maybe 50 or 60 years old, and it becomes more challenging to break down the old habits and install like the new ones.
So how did you learn your habits? It started in a go-kart at the age of 4 years old. Give us like a timeline of how that developed into like your later racing.
So, I mean, at the beginning, you're just driving around because it's fun. You're enjoying the thrill of driving and understanding the cart or the car. Doing the same with my son at the moment. He was just in the simulator yesterday. We're going karting in a couple of weeks for the first time on a proper track.
That's the difference right there for the first starting point, is the fact that he's hopped in a sim straight away before going there. I'm guessing you didn't have that luxury.
I didn't know, because sims back then, and around 2000, year 2000, when I was stepping into cars, at least they didn't exist like they do today. And actually, the simulator side of things is really interesting, because I think it might open up motorsport, as I think we might be talking about. It might open up motorsport to a wider range of people. You can argue that sim racing is actually more competitive than real world racing. It very likely is.
There's so many examples of just what you're saying happening in the world as well. Like, I don't know the exact name, but I'm pretty sure you'll know. One of my kind of memories over the last few years was a lad that had won a sim challenge, and he ended up in one of the cars at Le Mans. I think it was with Nissan.
Yes.
It was around that. And it's those kind of stories that we hear about that then kind of opens up the other end of the cam, where we talk about people that have to race since they were younger. But there are people that kind of get these opportunities through sim racing. So I can see why you'd be pushing your lad to be doing that. But that wasn't there for you. It's like, how did go-karting progress into those next stages?
It's just time in the kart. I think back then it was a bit different than it is now, just because the seat time was reduced. I think if you look at karting now, there are kids out there that are just spending so much time in the karts. They're in the sim. They're so well prepared. But it was just doing as much testing as we could, as much racing as we could, and then some guidance from my dad. Well, my dad never karted. He raced at like a club grassroots level, and he pointed me in the right direction.
Well, we all think growing up our dads are the fastest racing drivers on the planet, but there's definitely a crossover point where us guys and girls that are into cars have that crossover. We're like, do you know what? I think I'm faster than you now, Dad. And they've got to kind of accept it. But something you said was really interesting that I want to dive into is natural talent. Because natural talent is a phrase used on so many videos we see about racing. It's used when commentators are describing a certain driver. Maybe they're describing Max, for example, versus someone that's had lots and lots and lots of training, more analytical potentially, to get to the way they drive or the way that they are on track. Could you define natural talent to me a little bit? Because what you said a minute ago about it being, it's not natural talent, it's just the things that you kind of develop in your earliest years. Do you believe that to kind of fully be true then?
I think it's a blend, right? And there's no way that we can ever know, right? How do you know? Everyone has different amount of training, different quality of training. They start at different times in their life. So it's definitely a blend, but I would say it probably leans more to the side of building these patterns and habits. And how do you analyze your driving? How do you then set out a plan to improve on track, and developing in that way? So I think, if everyone's had equal training, equal quality, and equal amount of training, maybe there is some difference there. That's when the mentality comes into play, a confident driver and a mentality like somebody like Verstappen, relatively aggressive, very analytical in how he drives, very precise in how he drives. That then also comes in. And is that natural, or is that just the way that he's been brought up and, it's nature versus nurture? It's a difficult thing to actually, you just can't pinpoint it.
When did you start to realise that you had that thing, that natural talent, that seat time from a young age, that you're actually quite quick? Did that happen during karting, or is that in like a series after that?
Karting's, it's difficult when you're a kid because you don't really know what's going on. And karting's a very difficult environment, actually, because what ends up happening, even when I was doing it in like the mid-90s, the karts are so responsible for the speed of the driver. And so, we went up into the senior category when you're 12 years old. TKM was the name of the category. And I was quick straight away. I was running at the front of the national championships, which was a bit unusual actually, because it's 12 to 16 age range. And obviously there's a big development in you as a child heading.
Probably where we have a lot of our earliest development years is in that age range.
Yeah, exactly. So I went in and I was quick straight away. I was running at the front of the national championships. And then at the end of the second year, I was running like 6th in the national championships, which was great. It would just set me up then to potentially win the year after or the year after that. And at the end of that year, my good engine that I had seized, and I didn't have a good engine anymore. And the next year, just got another engine, and I was running mid-pack. And that was very difficult to understand as a kid of 13 years old or so. And it made me realize actually, the kart is extremely important. And while you think that you're quick, you think you're competitive, actually there's many other factors that are involved in the performance. And that's one of the issues with karting, is that, you will find families or teams that buy up all the engines, they'll mix and match all the components, run them on the dyno, keep the quick ones out of the market, keep the quick ones for themselves. And then, of course, they have an advantage. And that's why you see big budgets in karting, is because it still happens like that.
One of the lads that works for me part-time, does all of the shorts for Road Success and everything else, is Louis. We've referred to him as Child Labour Services on some of the channels as a bit of a giggle. However, he's now Teenage Labour Services, and he's racing Saxos. And that's really unlocked my mindset, just listening to him and his dad enter their first season of that. Of something so almost, I'm going to say, mundane to a lot of people. It's just like, okay, you're in a Saxo championship. There is so much more to it than that. The way that they find pace, the way that they can eke out advantages is unbelievable. But they've also just had a seized engine, which is why I was coming round to it. And there's so many people out there now going to be listening to that go-karting comment saying, I knew I had the slowest car. I knew I had the slowest car when I went with my mates. Next time I'm going to give them a backhander. But was that one of the most valuable lessons as well? That it's not all about you and your ability. You've got to make sure that all the pieces of the puzzle come together to actually give you a package that can provide speed.
That is true. I don't think I fully understood it at the time. It's a bit confusing. You're 12, 13 years old. I did understand it later. And actually then when I went into cars, I saw where the driver is more involved than it might be in a go-kart. I actually saw my kind of skill level seem to increase there because the driver's more involved at that level, although it is still, a lot about the machine.
At that age, if you haven't had those 6 years prior to that, then you are really at a massive disadvantage, which is where it comes into it. Because as you said, all of those natural skills, you'd have had 6 years is a long time. Like, people do start racing crazy early, really, compared to other sports and things that you do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're at a disadvantage. You've got 6 years less experience or whatever it might be. One thing that is interesting about racing is that as an amateur driver, you can actually get quite close to a professional. So when I was coaching drivers, I was coaching some young drivers and some amateur drivers, and you could get a 50-year-old bloke who was an am who'd not raced anything before. Within a couple of years, with enough training, you could get them within maybe 1.5% of a professional driver, which I just find astonishing, because if you look at other sports, there's no way that an am could get that close to a professional.
See, one of my favourite quotes I've ever heard on any podcast ever was a random podcast in the States I was listening to. I think it was Chris Williamson, and he said, the magic is in the work the others aren't doing, which sometimes it's such a small percentage, like that 1.5% difference. And that's the bit that's made up of starting at 4 years old and just having 100 more turn-ins on a corner compared to someone that's done it 50 times. Like, there is so many things that go into that 1.5%, even though it seems like a seemingly small number. Yeah. That's the difference between somebody being able to do it and frustrated that they're so close to being able to do it. But how do you get a rookie with basic experience, someone like myself that could go and slap my LT round Donny for on a track day and think, oh, that was okay, that was a respectable time? How do you get me within 1.5% of someone in a racing car?
The quickest way to do it is to break everything down in a really simple way. If you look at other sports where you do drills, you do the boring stuff, right? You break it down to the simplest form that you can, and you just do that hundreds of times. Driving is very different, right? You go and do track day, and you go out there and there might be race cars on the track.
Yeah.
You're trying to navigate all the traffic. You're just trying to go as fast as you can over a complete lap. So you're trying to do this kind of incredible kind of symphony of braking and turning and looking in the right place and balancing the car and getting some oversteer. You're trying to learn all of this while there's another 30 cars on track at the same time. The way that people learn race car driving at the AM level especially is just way too complicated. You're going in, imagine going, you're training for boxing or something like this. It's like going straight into a fight. You'd never do that, right? You'd punch the bag first. So when I ran the racing school, it goes back to Chris's quote that you were mentioning. We did the boring stuff. I hired Bruntingthorpe, which is a big runway, and it's got a bit of a track on there. And we would do the boring stuff. We would brake in a straight line, accelerate, brake in a straight line, get the braking pressure right, then do the next bit of the braking. We would even I would improve people's sensitivity on the pedals by accelerating in a straight line, lifting, letting the car decelerate a little bit, then getting back on in a smooth way. And if they didn't get on it smoothly, we just keep on doing it 50 times in a row. And that's how you learn in the quickest way.
It's funny that you mentioned Bruntingthorpe, because Bruntingthorpe was the first time I ever had an off in a car.
God.
And it was back when I was 18 years old. I was let loose in a McLaren 570 Spider up Bruntingthorpe, and we were just doing some drag races for someone's YouTube video. And that was the first time I realised that on a track environment, as you head up the runway, there's a right-hander to come back down the other side.
Yeah.
That it is so different to the road, and your perception of speed sometimes is so different to the road. And we've been doing all these fast runs up and down. And I remember I thought, I'll take this corner quite quick. Now, I thought I was going in at like 80, for example, and I was going in at 120 because we'd been doing 180, 190 up the runway. My perception of speed was gone, and I completely missed the braking, overcooked it. I was in the field, the front splitter ripped off. Like, it was my first big lesson in a car, was that exactly. But if you take that person, there is a lot of potential there to be unlocked with the right training then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can all be learned. It's very rare that I've actually been sat next to somebody and said, they just don't have any ability. I think with enough training, you can get there. I have worked with drivers that initially you're like, this guy's going to struggle. But actually, given the right training, given some time, they build that feeling, they build the right processes, and they become quick.
Many of you might not know this, but away from the recordings that I do in my van studios, I've actually got a digital marketing agency. Now, we specialise in a lot of automotive clients, but we cover everything really. Our team is made up of PPC specialists, SEO specialists, and the most talented designers I've ever seen, which have done work like the Starnagloss website, the TWR website, and many more. We've actually just built Icon Box for the Auto Alex crew as well, meaning that people that watch their channel can buy their favourite merch seamlessly and in style. So if you're interested in starting a project and you'd love to speak to us, just tap the link below and let's hop on a call. Let's dump that down a little bit. Why would someone struggle versus someone not struggle? And can we look at it as like, a lot of people are familiar with the personalities on the F1 grid. You've got someone like Yuki from 2 years ago who's just like, and then you've got someone really cool, calm and collected, maybe like a Bottas figure. Who is the easier one to train?
Well, with the F1 drivers, that's something different. But if you're talking about someone who might be be pushing too quickly at the beginning and someone who's not quite quickly enough, it's actually easier to bring the more aggressive driver down than it is to push the other one up.
Okay.
It still depends. It's not black and white. But if you've got someone who isn't worried about the speed, but they just need the refinement, that's generally an easier task than building the confidence in somebody to get them up to the limit.
So where is that first magic unlock? You said about breaking it down into real simple steps, but are you looking at kind of, is there like a single thing? Is it like braking is the biggest place that people can gain an advantage, or is it cornering, or is it like what is the thing that if you were stood on the pit wall of Donny watching people going into the first right-hander that you see making the most consistent mistakes?
The biggest thing that anyone can work on is making sure they're looking in the right place. It sounds super simple. What happens is when they get in a car, especially on the track day or when it's busy, there's a lot going on, right? You're using a lot of mental bandwidth. You might have the adrenaline flowing in you. A lot of people think, oh, I just need to push hard. I just need to go faster. That isn't the right way around. You do that, you start making mistakes. You shouldn't have to be brave, right? A racing driver's not brave. If they're brave, to be brave, right, it means that you are not sure of the outcome on the other side. If you're being brave into a corner, you're going to have a crash at some point because you don't know you're not predicting what the car's able to do. A racing driver will always believe that the car will go through the corner at a certain speed, right? And so they're predicting how the car's going to behave, whether it's going to touch the limit or not, to start sliding. But actually, the biggest thing that drivers can focus on is the vision. And what I was leading to there is if they're full of adrenaline, what naturally happens is your vision comes down close to you and it becomes more tunnel vision, right? You're kind of full of adrenaline, you're running away from that tiger. Everything comes down like this. And it happens to me as well, right? If I get in a quick car, I get in an F1 car when I haven't been in one for 3 or 4 months, my vision naturally comes down and I have to force myself to open it up. Now, I've done it enough times in my lifetime that it happens very quickly and I readjust. But my natural instinct is for that to happen. And that happens with a lot of drivers on track. So if you're heading into Redgate at Donington, as you were mentioning there, if you're not looking in the braking zone, if you're in the braking zone and you're not looking at the apex, which is what a lot of drivers will do, they'll just be looking, 10 meters in front of themselves. They'll brake. And then when they get to that turning cone, they'll go, oh, there's the turning cone. Just turn the car towards something on the inside. They don't know what they're turning towards. And so they can't estimate the speed. They can't estimate the right line. Everything's coming at them really quickly because they're not looking far enough ahead. Now, if you, in that braking zone, look across at the apex, you're triangulating your position as you come into the corner, which means that you understand the speed that you're coming into the corner. Everything slows down because you're looking further ahead. Your line will be naturally perfect. I've not met a driver who can't go on the right racing line if they're looking in the right spot. You understand when to come off the brakes. You understand when to turn in without the use of these stupid cones. And everything's just so much easier. 80% of driving quickly on track is vision. Everything falls from there. Everything leads on from there.
To give an example of what you're talking about actually having a profound effect on someone, have you got like an example that you think back to someone that you coached that was in like position A and finished in like position B? Like there was such a journey in a kind of short amount of time just from a few things that you changed.
Yeah, there was a driver years ago that I coached in a Caterham. And one of the key things is they begin to learn how to look further ahead. But then when there's other cars on the track, and again, it comes down to bandwidth and adrenaline, when there's other cars on the track, they're in a race, their vision just comes naturally down. So we taped like a sticker on the dashboard just to bring them back into focus. So every time that they would see this, they thought, lift my vision up again. And he went from running mid-pack in this Caterham championship, which was pretty competitive. And then as we did this, we stuck this thing on the dashboard. I think he came second. He was on the podium, which was like unheard. He hadn't had anything or any glimpse of a position like that before. And yeah, it makes everything so much easier.
Do you think people try and transfer skills that make them quick on their favourite road, for argument's sake, over to the track as well? And there's almost no correlation between the two?
There's zero correlation. I would say, I don't know, because I'd never asked that question, but I would say that people believe that if they can drive down a B road quickly, they can be quick on the track. And to me, it's a completely different world.
I think that's where I had my biggest education when I was in my teenage years, like 6-7 years ago, was in that exact thing, because I decided to take a ROSPA Institute of Advanced Motorists test. So I did and I got a silver in it, so not quite gold, but I'm never gold in anything. But I did this test and I expected it to be like, do you know every single road sign and what it means? And do you know like every single white line, or if it's dotted, like what the difference is between the two? And I expected it to be like very much suck eggs and all about like the things that I was never good at school, which was doing the revision. But what it was all about was finding the limit point. of vision, and it was like constantly like, bring your eyes up, you're looking at the car in front of you, look for the limit point, look at where the corner starts opening up is when you accelerate, look when that corner stops closing. And it was all about that so much driving on the road could become a lot safer if you just opened up your vision, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then I took some performance coaching with a guy called Ivan, I still remember his name, from Total Car Control. And I went out with him for 2 days on how to safely drive my sports cars on the road in a spirited fashion. And the first thing he said again was vision. Like, bring your vision up, look further forward. Do you understand your limit points? You can take this and go forward. And now you need to understand position 1 on the road, like right over to the left, all the way over to position 5. However, when I tried to correlate some of those things over when I started track driving around 2021, there is like, the track is so much bigger for one than the road. Like, there's so much more space to kind of learn stuff and gain an advantage. So you've trained somebody to improve their vision. It's like a massive tick, and you're trying to keep them reminded to do so because you can get so involved in racing. What's the next biggest thing? Are you getting the string out between the steering wheel and the accelerator pedal?
It's a bit more complicated than that, to be clear. But yeah, corner entry is probably the hardest part of the corners, where you can find the most time, because when you're talking about the limit there, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but when we talk about it in a racing sense, we mean is the car sliding? But the limit is not a singular kind of point. If you change how the car behaves coming into a corner, you can lower the limit, and actually you can be sliding but be slow, or you can increase the
limit of vision.
Yes.
So the limit of what is the furthest point you can see, like the vision point, like the furthest piece of tarmac that you can see is the limit on the road, for argument's sake. But the limit in referred to a racing stance is obviously when the car starts to lose it, basically.
Yes, exactly. So when you talk about it on referring to a race circuit, we're talking about the limit of grip. But you can change that limit of grip, right? So depending on how you balance the braking, depending on how you trail brake coming into the corner, this is the most important part. It was Schumacher who said that, the reason that he thought he was quick was because of the corner entry, because of how he trail braked into the corner. It's the most complex part, because you imagine coming up to a corner, you've done the main part of the deceleration in a straight line where you shed most of the speed. But then as you begin to turn into the corner, you're still on the brakes. Not necessarily to slow the car down that much, it's more to change the pitch of the car, like this. So if you hold on to the brakes a little bit more, you've got more deceleration, means you've got more load transfer on the front of the car and less on the rear. So if you hang on to the brakes a little bit more, the nose will have more grip, because it's pushing those tyres into the track harder, which gives them more grip, and the rear less. But it's almost like a seesaw. You give the front some, you take some away from the rear. What actually most enthusiastic drivers do is they trail brake too much. They'll brake coming into a corner, they'll hang on to the brakes too much because they're coming in kind of, all a bit of a hot mess coming into the corner, and they'll turn it in, at which point the rear feels really lively and they'll say, okay, that's the limit. But it's not. You're using the limit of the rear of the car, right? Because the rears are sliding, but actually you might only be using 60% of the grip at the front of the car. What you actually want to do is try and transfer some of that load, some of that grip rearwards, which balances the difference between the front and the rear more, which means overall you increase the amount of grip the car's got. So what you in fact want to do is brake, release the brakes probably a little bit earlier and a little bit lighter pressure, so that the nose isn't digging into the track quite as much, level off the car a little bit, therefore you generate grip from seemingly nowhere.
Because that's another thing that people get wrong, right? Is they come off the brake pedal, they treat the brake pedal like they've got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And most teachers I'm referring to, most trainers would say that you need to kind of release it in a calm manner to kind of make sure the car doesn't go, what are you doing? You're not on the brake or the accelerator, there's nothing going on here. Does what you have just talked about only apply to rear wheel drive cars though?
No, it's because the driven wheels make no difference on the corner entry.
Okay,
you might adapt your line slightly in a front wheel drive car, but actually the balance that you're talking about going in, it doesn't have anything to do with the driven axle. The technique is exactly the same.
You obviously have learned so much by doing it and understanding and doing lap after lap after lap after lap, but You provide this content on your channel and you've put it together in so many short, easy to understand videos for so many people to understand. And that's out there now, and sims are out there now to practice on without the walls and all the rest of it. But who taught you when you were younger? Where did you start to get your experience and understand those things to become a racing driver?
I actually believe that I'm quicker now at 40, I was 40 last week, than I was when I was 20. Because I understand everything a lot more. I was just quick when I was younger. Now I understand the engineering behind the cars. I understand how they're working dynamically. And because I've sat next to hundreds and hundreds of drivers, that's actually where I did most of my learning, just through sitting in the passenger seat and seeing how different people approach it. And reading books and understanding the physics behind what's gone on. And I hadn't done that until probably my mid-20s, when my racing career was coming to an end, and then I decided to go and coach. And actually the start of Driver 61, I wanted to put that information out there. And so there was a lot of learning going on there. And that's why I ended up building the racing school that I built.
Your goal at the point of you being in teens and stuff, though, was Formula One, right? Like it is for so many people, we're captivated by Formula One. Do you think if you had that extra information available in your late teens, early 20s, that would have given you a better shot at it? Or have you learned now that like to get to that level, there's so much more that comes into it that's almost like impossible to affect unless you're in a certain circumstance?
No, it wouldn't have helped. Maybe if I had a business degree, that might have helped.
It's really interesting you say that, because I had Karun on
Yeah.
a few weeks back, and he spoke about how that was one of the most important things he did, was understand the business side of it, because of how important it was to get your name out there, to speak to the sponsors in the right ways, dress appropriately, and all the other things that come into being a one-man band racing driver, essentially. And Karun says himself how much support he had, and yet he still needs to learn that. So it's quite interesting, that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? You need to have that understanding from an early age. And while my dad did race at a club level, I don't think as a package we didn't understand how F1 worked. We went along and pushed as far as we could go, and all the sponsorship that I got was genuine sponsorship. It wasn't deals with my family, or it was all. I wasn't part of any academy because they didn't exist like they do today. It's just, when I look back, I just think it was basically impossible. There aren't many stories of people coming through and without the funding from an early age. If you're enjoying this episode, please make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to The Road to Success.
But you've still managed to make a success of all that talent. And I think so many people that enter and understand and learn this crazy thing, which is racing, and have that passion, that determination, that drive, that competitive spirit to get in a car, to want to win, to want to get better, to keep improving, to be able to get so frustrated, so stressed, to sometimes overcome injury and scary things that happen. Like I've got Billy Monger coming on hopefully in a few weeks, and like his story is just absolutely insane when you look at it like that. But you've managed to transfer all of that into something that's equally exciting, and you're able to take it to the next level with your channel, which I believe you started in 2015, but it was a different name then, right?
It was Drive 61 2015. So after I raced, I went, I coached and I ran events in the space, and got to the end of 2014, 2015. I was abroad for like 6 months of the year, which was great fun actually while I was in my 20s. But I was like,
having the time of your life.
Yeah, I was having the time of my life. I was having fun, yeah. But I did that for 4 or 5 years. But it was hectic. And I just wasn't, I wasn't financially in the position that I wanted to be in. And I was working for other people. And so I just thought, I want to build something that's my own, that can improve and build each year. That's the thing with racing, right? You get to the point where you're like, okay, it's binary in the success. Not in terms of racing itself, but in terms of whether you go racing or not. So you either raise the sponsorship, you either raise enough sponsorship, or you raise 20% less than you need, you don't go racing.
Or you build a bloody big YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this was the point. I was like thinking, I'm putting all this work in, I'm working flat out as hard as I possibly can. It's very stressful because it feels like life and death all of the time. This is everything that I've looked for in my life. And actually, I can put this work in for 5 years and it's not building year on year. Every year it's the same thing, going to try and find the money. And if you don't find the money, then then you don't go racing, right? It's really difficult. And when you look at if you take a view on it, remove the emotion from wanting to be a Formula One driver or be a professional paid driver, it's the likeliness of it happening is very low, right? If you put that effort into a business, it's an easier thing to make work. You're more likely to make it work.
But are you content with the fact that you had such a stab at it? And let's be real here. There's not many people that wanted to get to Formula One, didn't quite make it to Formula One, but still get the chance to drive Formula One cars. Like, that is a very small world that you've been able to kind of set that up. And this is why I do Road to Success, because Road to Success and success of whatever your end goal was can manifest, as we said at the start, in so many different ways. And the fact that you're able to build a business, a channel, and get to drive Formula One cars, when you look back on how difficult it was year on year to gain that sponsorship, and you're in that complete turning wheel constantly of, are we going to be able to go racing? It's insane how some decisions can have such a great big outcome. But you wouldn't do this now if you didn't have such a passion for racing and some success. So before we leave your kind of racing years, and I know there's so much more to unpack there, but what was a race that stood out for you loads, that when you're talking, when you're referring back, there's something that that one was the one? Do you have that in terms of your racing years?
In terms of when I was racing, it was a stressful time, if I'm completely honest with you, because it was always about raising money. And then when I raced in the States, I did Indy Lights on a shoestring budget. I was out in the US by myself when I was 19. My family didn't come with me. I was trying to raise money, raced a little bit, didn't do any testing, would go there into free practice 1, free practice 2, and then go into qualifying. Really stressful time. We did reasonably well, but yeah, when you're asking about I loved it, of course, but it was hugely stressful because at 19 years old, you're thinking, every race feels like it's the beginning of something great or the end of the career, right? I would have loved to have been in that position where all of the contractual stuff and the finance was taken care of and you can just focus on the racing. But, for me and a lot of other drivers, that just isn't the case. When you ask me when I think about races that stand out in my mind, is actually more recent. It's the stuff that I do for fun that I just go in and enjoy. I love driving. It doesn't matter what car it is. I love extracting the speed from it and from the cars. Last year I did a race with my dad, 4-hour endurance race, and that's probably the most fun I've ever had in a race car.
I discovered your channel when I watched a video titled, "Can a normal person drive a Formula One car?" What a fabulous question. But I'm going to rephrase that question to you. What is it like when a racing driver drives a Formula One car for the very first time?
For the very first time? The very first time I drove a Formula One car was 16. So it just felt normal because at that age you just do it, don't you? It's not like you build up any expectation. You just jump in and go. I didn't know any different, to be honest with you, other than my neck was probably sore afterwards. Now, it obviously feels like a very privileged and special experience, and I cherish every car that I get in. I've driven 30-something different F1 cars now. So I think once I stopped racing and had a rest period of 5 years of I was still racing, but not at the kind of highest professional level, you get a perspective on it and you realize how special it is. I've obviously got mixed emotions about when I was racing. I loved it, and it was also very stressful at the same time. But since then, as things have evolved, I now look back, and whenever I get in a car, this is a special moment. I love going to the tracks now. I love just hanging out and speaking to the teams and the drivers, and just that whole environment. It's become a much kind of friendlier place for me now. Just less pressure, so I enjoy it more. But yeah, going back to what it's like to drive a Formula One car, depends on the type of Formula One car. The earliest car I've driven is a 1982 Lotus, all the way up to the mid 2010s. Not driven one of these new generation cars. I'm still waiting for one of the F1 teams to ask me.
Hi, Alpine.
Yeah. I just thought Haas were putting some drivers in their car, so we need to go to Haas. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the car. For me, my favourite cars are probably around like late 90s, early 2000s. Not driven a 2004. I'd love to drive a 2004 car.
Why?
What are they? 600 kilos, V10, big downforce. Lap records have only just been broken in the last few years. So they are like raw, they are noisy, they are pure. The car's now at 800 kilos. They're, I've not driven one. I've driven a couple in the F1 sims, and they feel a lot more, sounds strange, but they feel a lot more lethargic. Big boats, they take a while to turn. Whereas those cars from that period, 2004 particularly, they were nimble. When you watch the footage, you can see them moving around. They look a lot more alive. And I think for the most raw, extreme F1 experience, that's probably the time.
Now, after explaining what those cars are like, and after the audience hearing that the first video that I discovered on your channel was can a normal person drive an F1 car for the first time, if they haven't seen that video, let's describe that very car that you're talking about, the 2004 version, 600 kilos, V10, nuts. How long would it take for your average person to not kill themselves in that car when they first go out, or even set off from the line?
Well, have you watched the video where we put a subscriber in a Formula 1 car?
I've not.
You've not? No, so maybe watch that one next, because we did it. When we passed 1 million subscribers, we picked a subscriber at random, and they came to Paul Ricard and drove a 2013.
Was it blue?
Was it blue? It might have been, because it might have been in Alpine colours.
Yeah, I think it was.
It was in Alpine colours, yeah. It was actually a Lotus.
I've seen parts of it, but I can't remember the intricacy of the video.
Yeah, so we got a guy who's 27, 28, picked him at random. He flew across to Paul Ricard. I coached him for the day with Alpine and the racing school down there called Winfield Racing. We put him in a Formula 1 car. Not done anything before aside from karting. And he drove the car, and he was quite fast, actually.
Can you just dive into why, when you've hit 1 million subscribers, you decide to give a subscriber the opportunity to do that in a modern car versus I'm taking a Formula 1 car of this generation out for the very first time to you? Are you very much like business and channel first, knowing that that video would have far greater opportunity than maybe if you were to jump in the car and do it?
It'd be boring if I did it, right? I mean, not boring, but it's a different feel.
But are you willing to sacrifice some experiences for the growth and benefit of the channel and your audience as a whole?
Of course, yeah. I mean, not really because of the growth. I just thought it was a cool thing to do. I mean, it's not cheap. We paid for it, right? It cost me 20 grand. But I just thought it'd be a much better experience, and actually the subscribers and the people who watch our content are the ones that have enabled us to have a business. So why would I want to spend that money on me? And also, I've driven that car before, so I didn't need to drive it again. But getting Ricky in the car was magic. I loved it. It was better watching him do it, and just the emotion and just the excitement, of course, that he had, and we filmed it, of course. Than me driving it. Yeah.
What was one of the biggest things that he had to overcome to be able to do it?
He underestimated how difficult it was. So he was from New York. He was like a little bit brash. He's a really super nice guy, right? But he came in and he was like, he thought he was Rocky. If you watch the video, you'll see. So he does the first session in the F4 car, right? And the point is just to learn the circuit. You're behind like a pace car. I drove the pace car. He followed me around to learn the track and learn the lines. Paul Ricard's quite a difficult track because it's really wide open. It feels like a car park at points. Difficult to pick out the braking points and all of this. Followed me around, did that really well. We told him that he did really well. The second session, he goes out by himself to make sure that he doesn't need to follow a car to do the right racing lines. Did the first 3/4 of the session well, was building speed well, and then a few laps before the end, on the quickest corner of the track, seen at the end of the back straight, which is a fast right-hander, flat, more or less flat out, almost. He tried to go in flat out, and it's a long, quick right-hander. And as he went in there, he realised he was running out of track because he'd gone in slightly the wrong line, and he lifted. And as I was talking about before with the load transfer, when you lift like
out.
that, all the grip goes to the front of the car, removes it from the rear, and I just hear, we were actually stood there filming it, and I just hear like, you just hear him spinning for like 5 or 6 seconds. And at that point, there's a barrier on the inside. If anyone's going to crash at Paul Ricard, where the barriers are a long way away, this is the closest one. And he went to the inside, and I was just thinking, shit, please don't crash. Because the decision was not mine as to whether he drove the F1 car. It comes from Alpine directly, of course. So at that point, he puts in danger the entire video and his whole experience, because there's no more sessions left. You know, that's the point at which he has to prove that he's sensible enough and competent enough to drive the F1 car, which is a massive step up. And he has this spin right towards the end of the session. So he came in, his kind of confidence level was on the floor at that point, and we have a conversation. Luckily, I spoke to Alpine and said, look at how it's progressed. This was, although it looked dramatic, it was actually a fairly small mistake. Let's tone him down a little bit and let's get him in the F1 car. And thankfully, they let him do it. And then he went and drove the F1 car. It did extremely well.
That's unbelievable. And like, what an opportunity for someone to be able to do that. And if I just unpack that for a minute, if I was to have, even though you jumped in your first F1 car at 16, if I was to take that kid with a passion of racing and say, even at near 40, you'd have been at the time, right? Because it was a year ago, was it?
Yeah.
When you did that video.
Oh, it was actually a couple of years ago, yeah, when we passed the million, yeah.
So now you would be essentially picking subscribers from your channel and putting them in Formula One cars to go for days out, which you'd film, which would somehow financially pay for itself.
It didn't.
Would that person be like extremely excitable? Is that opposite me?
Yeah, I would have thought so. What do you mean if someone's getting the opportunity
Because
to drive an F1
there
car?
must have been no, I mean, is you as a youngster would have these weekends and years where it'd be like, you can go racing, you can't go racing, emotion high, emotion low. But if you were to tell that person that in 20 years time, you were able to, for a job, essentially take someone out that's completely random, put them in Formula One cars, film it driving around tracks, what would they think? What would your old self think of that right now?
I think it'd be difficult to comprehend, right? I mean, that's cool. We do it because it's fun and it's cool and it's great to do that with a subscriber. I think the 16-year-old would be maybe a little bit confused as to how we got there because it's been a long and twisting journey, let's say. But I'm proud of what we've managed to do, and we're still constantly trying to improve and get better and build the business. So yeah, I think I'd be pretty happy.
Did you set out when you started Driver 61 to have 1 million subscribers and be doing the videos that you're doing in recent years? Was that the goal from the day of creating the YouTube account, or did it start as something else?
No, I think it's very, it started completely differently, and we've been through many iterations and many tests along the way. We've started things, we've stopped them because they've not worked properly. It's the same, like you're always like testing things, right? You're always A/B testing. It's like when you're driving, you go out there, you try something, does it work? Check the data. If it does, do more of that. If it doesn't, and then you have these big swings where it might not work completely. It's been the same with the business. So at the beginning, it was almost like a blog. In 2015, it was just a website, and I was writing articles like the videos that came later. And I didn't particularly like the writing, which is ironic because I spend a lot of time writing now. But I didn't particularly like writing, and I thought it would just be a better way to explain things using like a whiteboard and me on camera. Seems simple now, but back then, 10 years ago, YouTube was a very different place. So it started off there, and the whole point of making these in-depth whiteboard tutorials, right? They were pretty dry. They'd only get 20, 30,000 views. But they were highly valuable to a very niche audience. And the point of that, initially, to be honest, it was what I knew. And I was like, let's build the audience first, and then I'll decide what to do afterwards. I was reading a lot of books, like Tim Ferriss and these types of books that were like, build an audience. Social media was gaining a lot of traction at that time. Build an audience and then figure out what to, how to make a business out of that later. So I was doing that. I spent 6 months not earning any money. My now wife was supporting me. I was working flat out, and she actually looked after me for a good year, 18 months, 2 years financially. It was pretty difficult times. We then, off the back of the YouTube channel and the website, the decision was to build a motorsport e-commerce website, which was extremely difficult. So we'd sell like helmets, and you could buy tire warmers and whatever, right? And we'd partner with all these different suppliers, and we'd then bring all the orders together, and they'd come through us and then go out to the customer. We didn't stock anything. It was a very difficult business to make work. In fact, we didn't make it work. I did it for 18 months, and it was one of the most difficult things to try and get this thing going, and then say, I've invested all this time into it. I don't think it's going to work. Let's stop. Like, where's that point where you say, let's stop?
And the scary part of that is, it sounds like from your story, all you've ever known is racing. And even though running an e-com store is not necessarily racing, if there's a part of it which is selling the goods that lean back to the thing that you love doing, life sometimes gives you all these punches, and it feels like you're being punched away from the thing that you love. But obviously now, where you are with your YouTube channel, you've still managed to make your life what you love doing. But it must have felt at points there like it was potentially you're going to have to find something completely else, right, to do. Or did you know that you would be able to do something?
No, it's kind of, it's never been, okay, let's get to that point where we're at now. I've always been, moving around like this. I think that's how a lot of people naturally get there, unless they're extremely lucky that the first thing that they try works. And you're exactly right. Like, I was a racing driver, right? So when I then went in to try and make a business work, I had a big hole of knowledge. I'd never worked in a proper business before. I'd never seen how the processes worked. I didn't understand how to employ people. I didn't understand any of that stuff. And so I had this, I'm still learning now. I'm not, you're never done learning. I'm still trying to improve all the way. But it's that kind of philosophy, I suppose, that you get from racing, of always looking to improve the work ethic, figuring out the problems, looking at the mistakes and improving, that just continues through. That's what I was saying at the start. The fundamentals of what I do have stayed the same. It's just applied in a different way.
So when did you start to realise, beyond the 30,000 views a video, keeping a niche happy, potential startup monetization on the channel, that, oh my God, there's a light here at the end of the tunnel. This could maybe go to the next level. Was there a point for you when that was a thing, or a video or something?
There were a couple of points. So the next point after the store was pure desperation. So I lived in Barcelona at the time, which is where I met my wife. And I wasn't going to be able to send the money for the rent that month. And it had happened a couple of months in a row. And so out of pure desperation, I had an email list that I'd built up from the YouTube channel that I'd used for selling the e-commerce goods. And I emailed them and said, I'm thinking of putting a racing school together. We're going to do 2 days with 9 drivers per day. And it's going to be, I can't remember, 700 or 800 quid a driver. And literally over the next 24 hours, I just got all these payments come through. And I thought, oh my God, first of all, I needed that money.
But we've sold it. Now we'll figure out how to make it work.
That was basically what happened. Yeah, exactly. And I then realized, what have I been doing? I've been trying to sell these things that I'm not known for, in terms of there's loads of competition. It's just a product. So you're basically competing on price. Whereas these people are on my email list because they want to learn how to drive. So teach them how to drive. So I did this first run. It was heading into winter. I think it was 2017 maybe. And it went really well, but the format wasn't quite right. So I called up after the event everybody that had been there and said, what can we do better? What was bad? What was good? What would you like to see? And they all said, because I had three coaches and 3 cars. I was in the classroom, and they rotated around throughout the day. So they did classroom, driving, have a break, and they went around like this. They all wanted more time. They all wanted more of my time, and they wanted one-on-one. So I listened to them. And in the end, over the next 3 years, that built and built and built. And so in the end, it actually started turning over really good money. I was working with 120 drivers a year, different drivers. And that's when we were running at Bruntingthorpe. I put together this incredible process of teaching a driver. I figured it out over time. And that's where I learned the most about teaching, was because when you're a coach, normally you go to Donington, you go to Brands Hatch, you go to Snetterton, you're in a Ferrari, you're in a Porsche, you're in a Mazda. It's very hard to connect all the dots and see the patterns. Of course you do, but it's not that precise. But every driver was coming to me on the same track in the same car. So the only variable was the driver, and I was doing 30,000 miles a year with, all of these different drivers. When you do that, the depth of knowledge, the rate of learning is massive. I learned so much during that period. And I actually started writing a book because I wanted to get it all down on paper.
Despite your hatred for writing.
Exactly. Well, I started to enjoy it after I learned how to write. Then COVID came along and that all stopped. And that's why I haven't finished the book, was because YouTube took off at that point. So the next point along was COVID. We just moved back to the UK. My wife was 5 months pregnant. We were starting to get on top of things, like the racing school was going well, and then COVID hits, and we're in lockdown. And I thought, oh my God, like we've just started getting going. This is doing well. It was turning into something. What are we going to do now? And so I changed the strategy on the YouTube channel, and it was quite simple. Rather than talking about or titling the video "How to Trail Brake on a Racetrack," which will only ever appeal to 20, 30, 50,000 people, I broke down air and centers technique, which is essentially talking about the same stuff. 80% of the video was exactly the same. This is what the driver's doing, but it was packaged in a different way, in a more interesting way for a broader audience. And so that's the trick with YouTube, is like packaging it in a broad way that will appeal, but still going into the depth that I want to go into. And that's still the same today.
Because you can hook people to get into a subject matter, which you can see from your titles and thumbnails appeal to such a broad audience. Like pick me 2 or 3 videos if you're picturing your library in your head, which you were like, oh my God, like these are videos for me that I learned that this can work, like doing it in this way, like this appealed to like a mass audience. Obviously putting a subscriber in an F1 car has got to be up there. But prior to that, maybe when you started through COVID, coming out of COVID, was there some videos that you were like, oh my God, yeah, that worked?
Yeah, I mean, literally, you can, if you go back in the history of the channel, you can see how the content changes. And I think the first one was about Senna. It was about how he was heel and towing and how he gets on the throttle in that aggressive way. So I think the first one that really went was about Senna. It was about his throttle technique and how he blips the accelerator pedal, how he used to blip the accelerator pedal. And you can see the jump in the views. I mean, in 2020, we went from about 100,000 views a month. These are all long form views, of course. In the March, changed the strategy in the April. By December, we were doing 10 million views a month. And before that point, I don't know when it was, like April, May of 2020, I'd never switched the ads on, because I just thought, these people that are watching this content will come to the racing school. I don't need to earn any money off them with ads. And at 100,000 views a month, you don't generate that many ads, especially when the videos are only 10, 15 minutes long. And then, during some of that year, I turned them on and was like, oh, okay, this can actually be proper business. I always thought it would have been like pocket money, but actually realized that you could run a business off this. And as soon as we did that, started employing people and started building it and going from there.
So what does Driver 61 look like now? What does it take to run your channel?
We've been through different kind of phases that we've gone. We've gone all the way up to 12 people at one point.
Wow.
We had 4 channels, 2 main ones, Driver 61 and an automotive channel, and then Spanish language versions of those, where one was dubbed. The other one was actually a Spanish presenter for Driver 61 that we had. It's all changed now on YouTube because you can have the different audio tracks, can't you? So we've stopped doing those. But Drive 61 now, there's 6 of us and a freelancer or 2. We obviously focus on the content, but after running the other YouTube channels, I realized that I didn't want to just have a suite of YouTube channels, which at one point was the goal. I was like, okay, we've done Driver 61. Let's move into automotive. Let's see what else we can do. But realized that I didn't want to have this kind of media company, quite volatile, as I'm, I don't know what your business looks like, but for Driver 61, the YouTube channel can be volatile. ad rates move around, views move around. Formula One gets more or less interesting over time, and so there's lots of kind of volatility there. So I decided to create the content that I wanted to, protect ourselves from some of the easier to create content and AI type content that's coming out. So that's why I go to the F1 factories now. That's why I go and visit
Boots
cars. And yeah, exactly, because you can't replicate that. And one advantage that we've got now is we get access. Formula One started letting us in, the F1 team start letting us in, and that can be our moat.
Well, there was actually a part of my iPad that I've barely used today because you're so interested in the way we can dive into so many things, where I've started giving guests kind of 5 words and they have to pick a word that without that thing, the channel just couldn't operate. And I know sometimes there's 2, but usually one stands out to people. And some of the words that I've got is passion, control, curiosity, access, and consistency. Like, which would, if you were to order those in terms of like importance, what do you think stands out to you the most?
The one that stands out is curiosity. Forever being interested in how something works, in improving. I guess I might be blending that slightly with just keep on pushing or keep on working on something, but it's that curiosity of figuring stuff out. Probably the key thing, both in the content, but also in how the business works and how to put it together and how to build it and how to improve it.
After so many years and so many videos though, and doing it, week in, week out, and building the channel to where it is now, how much more stuff is there to cover between 1 million subscribers and 10 million subscribers? Are you ever just like with your team racking your brain like, oh my God, like we've covered this and we've done that, like, is there anything else to do? Or do you guys have like so many ideas? It's unbelievable.
No, we have. I mean, there's processes to the ideas, right? It's not just like they come to us. Our team, if they have an idea, or if they get inspiration from somewhere, we dump it somewhere. Then over time, we filter through those and work through them. Some of the ideas come through the partners as well, the F1 partners, because with that access, when you get access to something, it's actually a bit easier because you don't have to create the interesting topic, right? The interest is just because you've got access to something. Yeah, exactly. So that makes things a little bit easier. We've got plenty of ideas. We're not pumping out quite as much content as we used to. We do about 3 videos a month at the moment, but they're better videos, and a lot of the team, the focus is on actually the other stuff that we do. So we ran some tests over the last 18 months or so, which is one of the reasons why a YouTube channel is great, right? You can test other mini businesses, see which ones get traction and which ones are actually interesting, and then dive into those a little bit more. It's almost like a great testing platform. So we make these wallets that have parts of Formula One cars in them. So we'll buy like a crash damaged front wing.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah. So we were looking for a way to.
Didn't you do something with Haas? Didn't you have a Haas?
We haven't got a Haas one. We've got a Ferrari one here.
Now that's so cool. Take a look at that. So what has gone into making that?
That's quite a lot of work, actually.
I can see the carbon there. Like I literally want one.
I haven't got any with me. We sold them all actually. What goes? So that's a 2022 front wing end plate from Carlos Sainz's car. He crashed on the first lap of the Japanese Grand Prix that year when it was really wet, and we just like the parts already crashed, right? It's already partly damaged. So we take those. They go through a process, all handcrafted, where we take these slivers of the carbon, and our perspective is better to be given to. I think we've got 250 of these. 250 individual people who've got a piece of history in their pocket rather than just on someone's wall in the back of the garage or wherever it might go. And it's been a process to figure out how do you stick a piece of carbon? How do you get the carbon like apart? It's a challenge. It's a messy job. But we've got there in the end, and it's an interesting project.
I love to make comparisons when doing these episodes between things that the guest has said maybe 20, 30 minutes ago as part of their story and things that are so normal as part of their environment and their work that they do now. But you spoke about one of the hardest times that you've kind of gone through in your journey was doing that e-com store. Like it nearly broke you, and working out the margins and not being able to put your stamp in it. I just find it fascinating to take a minute to pause and kind of think about how that comes back round, but packaged in a completely different way. It's like sometimes people do one thing, like they start the e-com business or they want to sell stuff, and then the YouTube channel maybe comes after that as a form of marketing to try and push people to the thing. But it's so funny how even though you've gone through such, I suppose, hatred in a way of that thing because you couldn't quite make it work, it's actually the other way around, that in the future the YouTube channel unlocks the ability to do the e-com again and to sell something and to make a product and to physically ship it, which was what you were going for years ago as well. It's just a funny thing to kind of see that people think sometimes it's all lost. Like you think you start the store, that all of that's lost, or you're at the lowest point, or you can't afford to do anything, or you haven't made the money. But it's so funny how these things come back round and have value. Because surely when you were doing these, you were leaning on lots of things you learned from your days in e-com, right?
It's a constant cycle, right? It's the same as driving. You do something, you analyze it, you adjust, and you just keep on going in a cycle. The end product here, whether it's this, the e-commerce store, the YouTube content, is constant testing, right? We're testing all the time, every single video. 10 combinations of titles and thumbnails, different structure to the story, constantly analyzing that and adjusting and improving. It doesn't matter whether it's a YouTube video, it doesn't matter whether it's this wallet, it doesn't matter it's how we run the business, or whether you want to get quicker on the next lap than you've just been on a previous lap. It's the same thing, just keep on doing that.
But it's all risk management as well, because at the time it was obviously a huge risk to figure out what it was that you needed to do when you were at a point of pressure. And risk management also plays a part on everything that you do with teaching people, and have done in the past with teaching people on track and on circuit. And before we finish off today, I really want to pick your brains on something, which is it a really fine line to coach someone or to make someone better when they're also managing the financial pressure in their head through a lap on a track day of the thing that they're driving, if they bin it into a wall, is done and dusted? Like, I always call it, I go in at 8/10 to everything that I do on track, because I know somewhere between 8 and 10 is the point where I bin the McLaren.
I think as your confidence and experience grows on track, that will probably go away. I think it also depends what you're trying to get from it, right? If you're racing, I don't have that part of my brain. I'm either racing or I'm not. And if that came into me, I wouldn't go racing. So I'm either flat out or not. But the other thing is, like I said to you earlier, a racing driver doesn't need to be brave. They are predicting what's going on with the car, and they will predict that it will go around a corner in a certain way. They're not thinking about the danger. Now, they might approach a lap, at least when they're learning, in a different way, right? So I would always get my drivers to when they were finding their feet, pick the corners on the circuit where it has the most runoff, or it's a slow to medium speed corner where you can begin to lean on the car and understand what the grip level's like on this particular track. Do that in the safe areas. You don't want to be doing that, at Cops at Silverstone on the first lap. You want to be doing it at Luffield, which is the tight 180-degree corner, because you've got much more room in which to make those imperfect decisions. Not a mistake, but if you run in a little bit too quickly, you're going to be able to collect it. Whereas if you do that in Cops, you get the wind going in the wrong direction. So I think you're going to end up going off potentially in the barrier. So it's balancing that risk and doing that in a strategic way where you're reducing the likeliness of crashing or making a mistake in business or whatever it might be.
You're clearly a very logical thinker, a very calm thinker. And at the beginning of the episode, you spoke about the challenges people have learning when there's so many people around you sometimes on track. What's your opinion on the Nürburgring? And more so the public sessions?
It depends what the goal is. Again, if the goal is to learn, it's a terrible place to learn. Yeah, if you want to learn to go fast, you want a short circuit that's easy to learn, where there's no cars, minimal distractions, with a coach who's not shouting at you all the time, because again, it's bandwidth. So the Nürburgring is the opposite of all those things. Really long circuit, loads of difficult to predict cars that are out there on the track. If you make a mistake, even by 1% or 2%, you're probably going in the barrier. Aside from that, if you're just going for the joy of driving, what a fantastic place, right? There's nowhere else in the world like it. I love these old school circuits. And yeah, I haven't been for a while, but I would like to go again.
Do you think it's dangerous? For a rookie? Do you think too many people go out there that probably shouldn't go out there?
Yeah, probably. I mean, That's a hard one. I mean, there's a lot of crashes there, right? But people should be allowed to decide to do. I mean, it's incredible that they open it up and people can go out there on track. I'd prefer them to go there and drive quickly rather than, out on the road just here. So it's good in that respect, I suppose.
Well, Scott, I can't believe the amount that I've taken into my brain today, and I'm going to have to decompartmentalize that and package it down. And this is certainly going to be one of the first episodes that with some of the things that you've been talking about, I'm going to have to do some overlays on the screen just like you do as well for the audience that are viewing this rather than just listening to it. But it's also been fascinating to take a bit of a deeper dive into you, how you've built that channel and all those things that come through in the videos but have been actually built from years and years and years of knowledge, understanding and passion. So thank you for giving me your time and the audience to talk about your journey. An hour always goes so fast on these things. It's unbelievable. I'd love to have you back again in the future. Thank you,
Ben. Been a pleasure.